When Reid postponed our wedding once more, I refused to cry. I had cried the first time, in the bathroom of the venue we had booked 18 months in advance, sitting on cold marble in a dress I had chosen on a Saturday morning that felt like the happiest day of my life. I had cried the second time quietly, in the car, while Reid explained that the Series A timing was sensitive and a wedding would send the wrong signal to investors. I had cried the third time on the phone to my mother, who said nothing for a long time and then said, very carefully, that she hoped I knew what I was doing. I had cried the fourth time alone, which was the worst kind, because there was nobody to perform composure for and nowhere to put the feeling except directly into my body where it settled like sediment. The fifth time, something different happened. Reid said the words. Something about the Singapore expansion and Q3 projections and how a wedding right now would be a distraction from momentum they couldn't afford to lose. He said them the way he said everything that cost me something, casually from across the kitchen island, without looking up from his laptop. I stood in our kitchen in the apartment I had quietly funded for 3 years, and I felt the familiar machinery of grief begin to turn. And then it stopped. Not because the hurt wasn't there, because something underneath the hurt had finally run out of patience with it. I went to bed without saying a word. The next morning, while Reid was in the shower, I made 4 phone calls. By the time he came downstairs, I was drinking coffee at the kitchen island with the particular calm of a woman who had made a decision she intended to keep. He did not notice anything different. That was the last thing he ever failed to notice about me. If you are new here, welcome to Emerald Novel. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Now let's get back to Naomi's story. The 4 phone calls took 11 minutes. The first was to my attorney, a woman named Claudine who had been waiting for this particular call with the professional patience of someone who had reviewed my financial entanglement with Reid Calloway's company 6 months ago and had said, with careful neutrality, that she wanted me to understand my options. I told her to begin the formal process of unwinding every personal guarantee I had attached to Calloway Technologies in the past 4 years. She said she would start immediately. The second call was to my private banker at Coutts. I instructed him to freeze the joint operational account Reid and I had established specifically to cover his family's recurring expenses, a category that had expanded so gradually over 5 years that I had never confronted its full size until I sat down one evening with a spreadsheet and understood that I had been quietly funding 4 people's lifestyles in addition to my own and Reid's. The third call was to a moving company. I booked them for Thursday. For rooms of personal belongings, the things that had been mine before Reid, and would remain mine after. The moving coordinator asked for a destination address. I gave her my new apartment, the one I had signed the lease on 6 weeks earlier without telling anyone, the one that existed specifically because some part of me had understood, before the conscious part caught up, that I was going to need it. The fourth call was to a headhunter named Marcus Cole, who had been trying to place me at Meridian Global for 8 months. Meridian was Calloway Technologies' most significant competitor. They had been recruiting me specifically because they understood what Reid's company actually was, which was a structure I had built and that Reid had learned to stand at the front of while I stood behind it making it work. I told Marcus I was ready to talk. He said he could have me on a call with Meridian's London office by end of week. London. I had not planned that specifically. But sitting at the kitchen island in an apartment I had funded while Reid slept soundly upstairs, the word landed with a particular rightness of things that were always going to happen and had simply been waiting for the correct moment to announce themselves. Reid came downstairs at 7:45 in the navy shirt I had picked up from the dry cleaner on Tuesday because he had forgotten and needed it for Wednesday's board meeting. He poured coffee. He checked his phone. He opened his laptop.
He did not ask how I was.
He did not ask what I had decided about the wedding. He said, without looking up, that his sister Priya's car subscription renewal was coming up and could I handle it before the end of the month. I looked at him across the kitchen island. Of course, I said pleasantly. He nodded and went back to his screen. I finished my coffee and went upstairs and began making a list of everything attached to my name that I intended to detach by Friday. It was a longer list than anyone looking at us from outside would have believed. That was, I understood now, entirely the point. Reid's family had a property in the Cotswolds. A converted farmhouse his mother Elaine had acquired during what she described as a period of inspired investment and what the actual financial records described as a mortgage Naomi had co-signed 18 months ago when Elaine's bank had declined her application without additional guarantee. The farmhouse was photographed beautifully for Elaine's social media. It appeared in the background of her profile picture. It featured in a lifestyle piece a regional magazine had run about elegant country living. It had never, in 18 months, cost Elaine a single payment because every direct debit connected to it ran through an account Naomi managed. I removed the authorization on a Tuesday morning while Reid was presenting at a conference on sustainable tech innovation, which was one of 3 keynote topics I had helped him develop over the past 2 years, and which he delivered with the relaxed authority of a man who had thought of everything himself. I also removed Priya's car subscription, her boutique gym membership in Chelsea, the standing grocery delivery to her Kensington flat, the streaming service bundle registered to her email on my card. Then I called the wedding planner. Her name was Genevieve, and she had the specific composure of a woman who worked with London's executive class and had developed a professional immunity to being surprised. She met me at her Mayfair office the following morning, handed me a tablet, and confirmed the cancellation terms with the measured neutrality of someone who had seen this before but was sufficiently curious not to entirely conceal it. We had booked the venue 2 years ago, a private estate in the Italian Lake District. Boats, flowers flown in from the Netherlands, a guest list that included 3 members of Callaway Technologies' board and 2 venture partners Reid needed to impress. It had been postponed 5 times. The penalty for full cancellation was 30% of the deposit. I signed without hesitating. Genevieve looked at me over the tablet with eyes that had seen everything and were currently filing this particular morning in a category she would think about later. "That's a significant penalty," she said, with the professional care of someone offering information rather than judgment. "Less significant than a 6th postponement," I said. She nodded once, the nod of a woman who entirely agreed and was not going to say so. I was in a cab heading back across the city when Reid's first message arrived. "Naomi, Mum's just called me. Says there's some issue with the Cotswolds account.
Can you sort it?"
I put my phone face down on the leather seat. Then I picked it up again and typed 2 words. "Ask her." I watched the 3 dots appear and disappear twice before he stopped trying to respond. That was the first time in 5 years that I had replied to a request from Reid with something other than yes. It felt remarkably like putting something down that I had been carrying so long I had forgotten it had weight. I found out about the painting the same way I found out about most things in my relationship with Reid. By accident, on a device we shared, in a moment he had not anticipated. It was a Thursday evening, for days before I had planned to leave. I was using the shared tablet to confirm a supplier invoice for a project I was wrapping up, and I accidentally opened the wrong email thread, and there it was, sitting at the top of the inbox like something that had been waiting specifically for me to find it. The confirmation from an auction house in Mayfair. A 1961 painting by a mid-century British artist whose work Petra Voss had mentioned once, briefly, in a meeting 3 months ago.
I had been in that meeting.
I remembered the moment because it had been a passing comment, the kind people make about beautiful things they do not expect anyone to remember, and Reid had not reacted to it at all. Apparently, he had reacted to it privately. The painting had sold at auction for £22,000. The buyer was listed as Reid Callaway. The delivery address was Petra's studio in Shoreditch. The note in the message field, typed by Reid himself, read, "You mentioned this once, and I spent 3 months tracking it down. To my brilliant co-founder, who deserves to be surrounded by things as extraordinary as she is." I sat with the tablet in my hands for a long time. I thought about our 5-year anniversary, which had been 6 weeks ago. I had quietly cleared 2 weeks of international client meetings in advance, hoping Reid would notice the space I had created and fill it with something deliberate. He had not noticed. On the evening itself, he had looked up from his laptop at 9:30 and remembered, audibly, that it was our anniversary, and had opened the drawer of the kitchen island and slid a gift card for a spa in Knightsbridge across the counter, without fully standing up. He had said he had not known what I was into these days. He had said I should go relax and stop being difficult about the amount of time he was spending on the Singapore deal. He had sent Petra a painting he spent 3 months hunting because she mentioned it once. He had given me a gift card because he did not know what I was into these days. I was the woman who had turned down a position at one of Europe's leading consultancies to inject personal capital into a seed round. I was the woman who had rewritten his investor pitch at midnight, 3 weeks before closing, because the original was not good enough and we both knew it. I was the woman who had managed the PR crisis when his beta launch failed and 3 major clients threatened to walk, who had flown to Stockholm on 12 hours' notice to contain a story that would have ended the company before it reached Series A. He did not know what I was into these days. But he remembered, with the tender specificity of a man paying close attention, that his co-founder had once mentioned a painting in passing. I set the tablet down. I did not cry. I had used up my tears on 4 previous occasions for this relationship, and I was not going to spend a fifth on information that was simply confirming what I had already decided. I went to the bedroom and finished packing instead. I left on a Friday morning. Not dramatically. No speech, no confrontation, no last look around the apartment with swelling music. I had a car booked for 7:15 and a flight to London at 10 and a meeting with Meridian Global's European director at 3 in the afternoon, and I treated the morning with the same logistical focus I had been applying to everything since the 4th phone call. Reid was still asleep. I left a single note on the kitchen island. Short, specific, professionally devastating in the way that very short things sometimes are when they contain the correct information. The note said, "The wedding is cancelled. The account authorizations are removed. My attorney will be in touch about the remaining financial separation. I wish you well." I did not sign it with love. I did not sign it at all. The car arrived at 7:14. I was outside at 7:13. I sat in first class with sparkling water and a copy of the Financial Times and thought about the painting in Petra's studio and the gift card in my coat pocket, which I had kept because it was evidence and because at some point it was going to be useful to have. London received me the way cities receive people who arrive with intention rather than accident. Efficiently, without ceremony, at the correct gate. Meridian Global's European headquarters was in a glass building in Canary Wharf that smelled of money that did not need to perform. No motivational quotes on the walls. No open plan designed to suggest creativity rather than produce it. Just quiet, expensive, functional space occupied by people who understood what they were doing and had been given the resources to do it properly. The European director was a woman named Harriet Osei, 50-something, silver-haired, with the particular directness of someone who had spent her career negotiating things more complex than pleasantries. She shook my hand and said, without preamble, "We have been trying to hire you for 8 months." "I know," I said. "What changed?" she asked. "I stopped being unavailable," I said. She nodded once, the nod of a woman who recognized an answer that contained something larger than its words and had decided not to push on it in a first meeting. We talked for 2 hours. By the end, the offer was on the table. European head of strategy, Meridian Global, London headquarters. Full executive package. A team that copied me on decisions before they became emergencies. A seat at the front. I signed the following morning. Reid called 4 times while I was in the meeting and twice while I was signing. I did not answer any of them. He sent a message at 11 that evening that said simply, "Naomi, what have you done?" I read it in my hotel room in Mayfair with the Thames visible from the window and the contract folder open on the bed beside me. I typed back, "I stopped doing things for you. It turns out there is quite a lot of space once you stop." I put the phone down and slept better than I had in 2 years. The painting became public on a Tuesday. Not through me. I had not told anyone about it. I had not needed to. Petra posted it. She had it installed in her studio and photographed it for her professional social media with a caption that said something about surrounding yourself with art that reminded you why you did the work. The photograph was tasteful. The painting was beautiful. The installation looked considered and personal in the way that expensive gifts look when they are displayed by people who are accustomed to receiving them. What Petra had not accounted for was the comment section. The first person to notice was a journalist who covered the tech industry and who had been following the story of my departure from Callaway Technologies with the focused interest of someone who understood that the real story was not the one being told. She recognized the painting from the auction house's public catalog, which listed the sale date, the sale price, and the buyer's name, because Mayfair auction houses publish these things as a matter of standard record. She posted a quiet observation about the timing. Then a financial blogger picked it up. Then a tech industry newsletter ran a piece connecting the purchase date to our anniversary. Then someone found the auction listing. Then someone else found my spa gift card. Not literally, but the story of it, because Reid had mentioned our anniversary in a podcast interview 2 months ago and had described it with the casual warmth of a man who is performing consideration rather than practicing it, as a quiet night in and a thoughtful gesture. The internet built the timeline. I did not have to write. Reid Callaway bought his co-founder a £22,000 painting on his anniversary. He gave his fiance a gift card for a spa. The wedding has been postponed 5 times. The fiance has left for Meridian Global. The painting is hanging in the co-founder studio. Within 48 hours, the comments were doing what comments do when the story is too precise to ignore. Self-made founder remembers the co-founder's taste, but not his fiance's. 5 postponed weddings and a tracking down a painting for months. That is not startup culture. That is a confession. Imagine funding a man's company from your personal trust and watching him commission a search for a painting because someone mentioned it once in a meeting. Petra deleted the post. The screenshots made that useless. Reid's phone, I was later told by someone who had been in the room, became unmanageable around noon on the day the newsletter piece ran. His communications team, which was a function I had built and trained before leaving, sent 3 holding statements in 4 hours, each one slightly more desperate than the last in the specific way that holding statements become desperate when the thing being held is no longer holdable. His board requested a call. His investors began asking questions that were not technically about the painting, but were about the painting. I was in a strategy meeting at Meridian when my assistant forwarded me the newsletter piece with a single line beneath it. She wrote, "I assume you have seen this. If not, you should." I read it and forwarded it to Claudine with a note that said simply, "For the file." Then I went back to the strategy meeting. Elaine called from the Cotswolds on a Wednesday. She had been holding out longer than I had expected, which was either dignity or denial, and I had respected the former possibility right up until her first voicemail, which clarified it was the latter. The first voicemail sounded like she was calling from a charity committee meeting. "Naomi darling, there seems to be some confusion with the farmhouse account. I am sure it is simply an administrative error. Do call when you have a moment." The second came 40 minutes later. "A slight change in register. Naomi, the bank is saying the guarantee authorization has been formally withdrawn. I cannot imagine this was intentional, but the mortgage payment is due in 10 days and the account is insufficient without your backing." The third came after she had spoken to her bank directly and had been told, in the polite but unambiguous language of financial institutions, that the authorization had been withdrawn voluntarily and deliberately and that there was no administrative error to resolve. Her voice had lost its charity committee quality entirely. I answered the fourth call. She began with, "After everything this family has done for you." I said, "Elaine, your family gave me a 5-year engagement that never became a marriage and a series of financial obligations that were never acknowledged as the generosity they were. I am happy to discuss which of those things constitutes doing something for me." A pause that contained several emotions she was choosing between. "You're going to let the farmhouse go into default over a disagreement with Reid. I am going to let the person who enjoys the farmhouse take responsibility for it. That seems reasonable. You were going to be family. I was never family. I was a credit line with an engagement ring." She inhaled so sharply I could picture the expression. "Reid will fix this. I hope he does. He should have been fixing it for 3 years." She had nothing left to say that the facts could support. The call ended. Priya lasted until Thursday. She called from a number I did not recognize, which suggested she understood that I had already made decisions about calls from her usual number. The background noise told me she was outside. Wind and the specific ambient sound of a London street where Ubers did not arrive when you expected them to. "You canceled my car subscription," she said, without introduction. "Yes," I said. "That is insane. That is completely insane. I use that every day." "I know," I said. "You will need to set up your own account. Reid is going to be furious." "Reid has been furious before," I said. "It has never changed anything significant about my decisions, and I do not expect it to now. You cannot just cut people off." "I did not cut people off, Priya. I canceled a subscription that was running on my card without my consent being meaningfully sought or my name being meaningfully acknowledged. That is not cruelty. That is accounting." She said something further that I did not catch because I had already taken the phone from my ear. I had a dinner to get to. Reid appeared in London 3 weeks after I left. He did not call first. He arrived at the Meridian building at 11 in the morning on a Tuesday and asked the front desk to let me know he was there. The front desk called my assistant. My assistant came to my office door with the expression of someone delivering information they found interesting. "Mr. Calloway is in the lobby," she said. "He does not have an appointment." "I know," I said. She waited. I thought about it for longer than the decision actually required. "Send him up," I said. "Conference room 2. Not my office." Conference room 2 had glass walls that faced the open floor of the strategy division. I chose it deliberately. Some conversations needed witnesses, not to perform for, but to prevent the kind of revisionism that happened when two people were entirely alone in a room, and one of them was accustomed to controlling the narrative. Reid looked tired in a way that expensive clothes could not quite conceal. He was still handsome, still put together, still the man I had once imagined standing beside an Italian lake in a dark suit saying words he had prepared rather than felt. He sat across from me and looked at the glass walls and understood the choice I had made. He did not comment on it. "Naomi," he said. "Reid," I said. "The story is out of control." "Stories tend to do that when they are true," I said. "We need a joint statement. Something that gives context. The board is asking questions I cannot answer without you." "You can answer them without me," I said. "The answers are simply less flattering without my involvement in shaping them." He leaned forward slightly. "This is not just about us. There are employees at Callaway whose livelihoods depend on investor confidence. You know that." "I do know that," I said. "I built the communications framework that maintains that confidence. It is in the documentation I left. Your team has the files. You were better at it than anyone I could hire." "I know," I said. He looked at me for a moment with the expression of a man encountering an equation that no longer worked the way it used to. "The painting," he said. "Yes," I said. "It was not what it looked like." I said nothing. "Petra is important to the company." It was a professional gesture. I said nothing. "You know how much you matter to me." I looked at him across the conference table in a glass room in a building where my name was on a door, and my decisions were not made around anyone's comfort but my own. "Reid," I said, "you spent 3 months tracking down a painting because Petra mentioned it once. On our anniversary, you opened a drawer and handed me a gift card without standing up. I do not need you to explain what that means. I need you to understand that I understand it completely and have made my decisions accordingly." He was quiet. "You left," he said. "Just like that." "Not just like that," I said. "After 5 postponed weddings and 4 years of carrying your company and your family's finances and your public image." "Not just like that." "Like someone who had given fair warning through 5 years of staying." He looked at his hands. "I still love you," he said. "It arrived 5 years too late and about £22,000 short," I said. He flinched. I stood up. "My attorney will complete the financial separation by end of month," I said. "I wish Callaway Technologies well. I mean that genuinely. I built too much of it to want it to fail." I walked out of conference room 2 and back to my office and closed the door and sat at my desk and breathed for exactly 60 seconds. Then I opened my laptop and went back to work. 6 months later, Reid's Series B closed at 40% below the projected figure. His board restructured the company. 2 senior positions were eliminated. 3 investor relationships that had been warm became formally cool in the specific way that investment relationships cool when the person who managed them is no longer in the building. Petra's involvement in the company became a governance question after a journalist published a detailed account of the painting, the anniversary, and the pattern of decision-making it suggested. The board asked whether undisclosed personal gifts between the CEO and co-founder created liability issues. Petra stepped back from her public-facing role. The painting disappeared from her studio's social media. She did not comment publicly. Neither did I. I did not need to. Priya found a job in events management and stopped posting luxury brunches with captions about deserving good things. She moved to a smaller flat in a neighborhood she used to describe, on social media, as charmingly up and coming. She deleted those posts too. Elaine sold the Cotswolds farmhouse in November. She told the local property newsletter that she had decided to simplify. The newsletter published a photograph of the farmhouse looking beautiful in autumn light. I saw it on a Tuesday morning in my London office while reviewing Meridian's Q4 strategy, and I felt nothing particularly strong about it, which was itself a kind of information about how far I had traveled from the person who had co-signed a mortgage to keep a woman's dream of country living intact. Meridian gave me a team of 14, and a budget I did not have to justify to anyone who did not understand what I was doing. They gave me a seat at the front of every meeting that mattered. They gave me a title that was mine, not a shadow of someone else's. I gave them the first coherent European expansion strategy the company had attempted and a crisis communications framework that the industry press described 3 months after its implementation as quietly revolutionary. Quietly revolutionary. I laughed when I read that, not because it was funny, Because I had been quietly revolutionary for 5 years inside someone else's company, and the difference between then and now was simply that the quiet was mine, and the revolution had my name on it. There was a man. I will say that because it is true, and because pretending otherwise would be a different kind of dishonesty than the one I had spent 6 months dismantling. His name was Declan Ward. He was Meridian's head of product, Irish, 41, with the specific quality of someone who found other people genuinely interesting rather than instrumentally useful. He did not ask me to manage things. He did not have a family that required funding. He asked me once, over dinner at a restaurant in Soho that neither of us could expense, what I was most proud of in my career, and he listened to the answer with the complete attention of someone who had asked the question because he wanted to know and not because he was waiting for his turn to speak. I did not fall in love immediately. I did something better. I let the possibility exist, without handing it to anyone before it was ready. I let it develop at its own pace, unhurried by the fear that it would disappear if I did not secure it immediately, unrushed by the anxiety of a woman who had spent 5 years operating in scarcity. There was no scarcity here. That was the thing about arriving somewhere on your own terms. The abundance was not about the man or the title or the city or the view from the office window. It was about the specific lightness of not carrying something that was never supposed to be yours to carry. I called my mother on the first anniversary of the last cancelled wedding. She answered before the second ring, which meant she had been expecting me.
How are you? She said.
Honestly, I said. Better than I knew was possible a year ago. She was quiet for a moment in the way she was quiet when she was feeling something large.
I told you, she said.
You told me carefully, I said. You were very diplomatic about it. I was terrified you would stop calling if I was not, she said. I would never stop calling, I said.
I know that now, she said. I did not know it then.
We talked for an hour. About London and the job and Declan, who she asked about with the restrained curiosity of a mother who had learned to let her daughter arrive at things in her own time. About the farmhouse and Priya and Elaine and the painting, which she found as specifically infuriating as I had known she would. Before we hung up, she said, You gave that man everything you had. Yes, I said. And he postponed the wedding 5 times. Yes, I said. She was quiet. Then she said, with the particular precision of a woman who had been waiting a year to say the correct thing at the correct moment. Good. Now, do everything you have for yourself. I stood at my office window after the call ended, looking out at the London skyline doing its perpetual gray and gold thing, entirely indifferent to the fact that somewhere below it a woman was standing in a building where her name was on a door, holding a phone still warm from her mother's voice, understanding something she had known for a year in her head and was only now fully knowing in her body. She was not behind anyone's story. She was the whole story. Reid had postponed the wedding 5 times because he believed I would always wait. He was right about one thing. I had waited. I had waited through 5 years of invisible labor and 5 postponements and a gift card slid across a counter by a man who did not know what I was into these days. Then I stopped waiting. And I let him discover, the way people discover things they should have known all along, that the light he had been standing in had a source. And the source had left the building. And taken the light with her. And that is Naomi's story. 5 postponed weddings, 1 painting that said everything, and a woman who finally stopped asking to be chosen and started choosing herself. If this story stayed with you today, hit the like button before you go, and drop a comment telling me the moment that hit hardest. Subscribe if you have not already, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments, did Naomi go far enough, or did you want a colder ending? Your comments decide how the next story ends. I will see you in the next one.